Hello and welcome to this special presentation on Rajya Sabha Television on the 4 years of NDA government. Today we have with us the Cabinet Minister for Ministry of Food Processing Industries, Mrs. Harsimrat Kaur Badal. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television.
Thank you.
4 years have been completed by your government, and this is a very important ministry, specifically when we talk about the agriculture sector, the farmers, and the Prime Minister's vision, which he has been espousing in the past 1 year or so. He's spoken a number of times on that, is doubling of farmers' income. So in what way exactly is your ministry contributing to ensure that that vision is achieved?
In reality, this ministry addresses almost all the key issues which face our nation today, not just the agrarian crisis and the plight of farmers, but this also happens to be one of a sector which is one of the highest generators of employment. So in a country which has 60% youth, everybody looking for job security, the sector which employs the maximum number of people plays a very important role. And thirdly, it's a sector which impacts every household in the country because it's concerned with food, and inflation and consumption of food affects every Indian. So it's a sector which can actually help towards controlling food inflation as well, because by the more you process, the more wastage will come down and therefore more availability. And of course, it's going to increase revenues as well. So when I talk about these four things, that the more this sector progresses, since the raw material for this sector is the farmers produce, the more is going to be the demand of the farmers produce. It's actually the food processing sector acts as a bridge between the farmer and the industry, where the industry will handhold the farmer, give him the know-how of all the scientific means and methods which the farmer cannot afford on his own, so that the farmer can produce that which makes the industry profitable. So this partnership between industry and the farmer is something what is needed to uplift the farmer. And when we talk about doubling farmers' income, it's going to play the key role, because I do not foresee farmers' income getting doubled just by farming itself. It's time the farmer has to move towards value addition of what he grows in the farm. There has to be infrastructure available at the farm gate level for him to preserve his crop so that it doesn't get wasted. When there's a glut and he's not getting the right prices in the market, he should be able to hold it and sell it when it's when he gets better remuneration. And at the same time, he should, what is not getting him a good price in the market, he should be able to value add to that, process it, and then get a much better income.
Okay, you spoke about the infrastructure, about this entire value addition thing which we're talking about here, because that is what the food processing industry is all about, giving farmers that impetus so that the wastage does not happen. Now, on an average, the figures which we have, on an average at least 10% of the production in foods and vegetables gets wasted even before it reaches the market. That's one aspect of it. Second aspect of it.
That's a very conservative figure. That's my target of where we need to reach. In reality, it is probably 8 or 10 times more than what you're saying.
8 or 10 times more than that.
Yeah. So the one study which my ministry did a couple of years ago showed that we'll waste almost 1 lakh crores worth of perishables of foods, grains and foodstuff in our country every year, 1 lakh crore rupees. And that was only 18%, but actually the figure is way higher than that.
Figure is way higher than that. So the figures can be different, but given the fact that you yourself is also aware that this is a huge figure which we need to address. And this can be addressed by addressing the infrastructure gaps in the cold chain, the supply chain, as well as the processing units as well. What are the initiatives which have been taken by your ministry to ensure that these gaps are filled properly? Because unless these gaps are filled, the farmers will not be able to benefit from that value addition.
So one of the reasons why we have very high wastages is that we are one of the largest producers of food in the world today. We're the largest producers of milk in the world. We're the second largest producers of fruits, vegetables, cereals, marine. And when we have such a huge raw material base where the farmers are working so hard and producing this, we process only 10% of what we produce. And we have smaller nations like Thailand and Malaysia which process almost 80% of what they produce. So the low processing level leads to high amount of wastage, which then impacts farmer distress as well. So you're absolutely right. To increase the processing levels, we need much more infrastructure. And to address those gaps in the infrastructure is what this ministry is all about, to set up that infrastructure. So by means of mega food parks, because you've got to realize that this is an industry which is capital intensive like every other industry. But the downside is that it's only seasonal because it's concerned with food. So whatever you're processing only comes for those few months of the year. But you have to run the industry for the entire year.
Season specific.
Yes. So because being seasonal, it costs more. And that's probably the reason why we're at 10% and not much higher, because it's more viable to put up some other industry which you can run the whole year and make higher profits. So that is why the government subsidizes the setting up of this infrastructure. And through a mega food park scheme, which is all about creating common infrastructure for food processing, where other units can just come and plug and play and start processing without having to put in all the capital intensive money as well as infrastructure. So our mega food park scheme is one where we have got food parks coming up, 42 of them across the country, out of which 12 are already operational. We have got 232 cold chains coming up across the country, out of which about 130 are already operational. And we have launched the new Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana, which also caters to mini food parks. It caters to backward and forward linkages, and it caters to units inside mega food parks also. So we're incentivizing setting up of all these, and I'm confident that with this, just the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana, where we've been given 6,000 crores of incentive to be given to set up infrastructure over the next 2 years, is going to leverage another 31,000 crores worth of infrastructure and investment, which is in this amount going to process almost 334 lakh metric tons of food, which is going to have the equivalent value of almost 1 lakh crores of rupees. So this is all what is going to be grounded and be happening in the next 2-3 years.
Okay, and additional, when we talk about infrastructure, apart from the cold chain and the mega food parks which you're talking about, we'll come to that as well, as to how your ministry could make it happen that 12 food parks were made operational, and the PMKSY also. But staying with the infrastructure part, in terms of pack houses, ripening chambers, and reefer transport as well, the requirement is huge, although we are trying to narrow down the gap as well. But the pace at which the gap is being narrowed down is something which industry experts also point out that will have to be pushed further.
So I totally agree with you, because as long as schemes are made and they are made on paper and they're just in the air, it's not going to impact on the ground. Which is why that I'm grateful to the Prime Minister that he separated this ministry from agriculture. It was combined, it was part of Agriculture Ministry till the last government, and agriculture was such a huge topic on its own that I don't think my office was even used for more than 5 days in 10 years. So when a separate minister came in just for this sector, which is why you will suddenly notice that things on the ground started happening. If 42 mega food parks were sanctioned since 2008, and one park is supposed to be ready in 2 years, from 2008 to 2014, in 6 years only 2 got ready. But how in 4 years have I got 12 ready? Because I monitor them every month. Every month the people are called, there are site visits, there are review meetings, and wherever the roadblocks are, be it with the state government or at the central agencies, they are being sorted out so that grounding happens. So now when instead of 2, there are 12 parks working, where each park impacts at least 5 lakh farmers directly, indirectly, and creates 5,000 jobs. 12 of them are doing that against 2 of them that were doing it. So obviously there's a difference. When 42 of them start doing it, there's going to be even bigger difference. So the aim of my ministry is that everything, be it a cold chain, be it a mini food park, or be it units, backward forward linkage, mega food parks, I'm pushing so that the grounding of these happen. And alongside, while we're working at changing policies to create an environment so that India becomes a destination, the food factory for the world really, we started off by creating 2,000 crores in NABARD for affordable, cheaper credit for the food processing sector. Then you must have seen 2 years ago, we also allowed 100% FDI and multi-brand retail of food, which is manufactured and produced in India. Last year, you saw we had World Food India, where we saw $14 billion worth of investment MOU signed within 3 days. Grounding of almost 30% of those projects have already started. And looking at the way the world has suddenly woken up to the opportunity of India because of the work that the government has done in the last 4 years and the policies that we have come up with, the ease of doing business that we have pushed in this sector, that in this year, the first ministry and the only ministry whose budget was doubled was the food processing ministry.
Okay, you're talking about ease of doing business in the World Food 2017, which was held, which got a emphatic response. Now, one of the point which has been pushed ahead is that international market is a huge market as far as food processing industry is concerned. So how does your ministry plans to tap that international market? Because there are countries where at least 60 or 70% of their food requirement is imported, and that to a processed food.
So while I agree that there are some countries which are big importers of food, but the reality is that today we are the second largest population in the world, that's India. And we have the largest quantity of food available in our country. And it is also a fact that we have a $600 billion retail sector in India, out of which 70% is food retail.
Yes.
This size of market is not available anywhere. The Western markets are all drying up. This is a growing economy and a growing market where the food market is set to treble by 2020 in another 2 years. The demand of food is going to go up 5 times in another 5 years. You don't have these opportunities and these markets anywhere else, which is why World Food India was such a huge success, because the world woke up to what the market in India is with this rising middle class, the kind of infrastructure coming up, the demand of food. They don't get this market anywhere. Today, anybody in the world wanting to increase their footprint cannot afford to ignore India. So while I agree that we are also geographically in very close proximity to a lot of food importing nations like Japan or like the UAE, which imports 90% of their food. We're geographically located where these countries can really tap in and feed their food requirements, and they're extremely interested in doing business, and which is why in this World Food India, we had all these people coming and signing MOUs, a lot of them to tap the Indian market to come make in India, and a lot of them to come source from India and take back to their own countries.
Okay, so you're saying that it's going to go hand in hand, international market tapping that part as well as pushing in the Indian market also. Now, if you come back to the Indian market and if you come back to the original, source here, that is the farmers, then PMKSY is one major scheme on which your ministry is working. You spoke about a lot of initiatives, but for to make our viewers understand as well, what are the major initiatives under PMKSY1 and what all has been achieved? What are the options available for the farmers here?
So Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana is basically an umbrella scheme which has 6-7 schemes under it. We've brought it all under one umbrella, and I have tried to make it so flexible that starting from the smallest farmer to a group of farmers to an entrepreneur to a small trader to a big time trader to a huge businessman, there's a scheme which fits everybody, because I don't believe one size fits all. You know, earlier there used to be one scheme and it applied. The Mega Food Park scheme was there, which required 50 acres of land and a couple of 100 crores as investment, and that's what it was. There was no way that any small person could take advantage of that. So I wanted a scheme where I could cater to the smallest to the biggest, and it was for everybody to choose which one they want to fit into. So we came up with this Kisan Sampada Yojana, where we put the Mega Food Park under it as well. We put the cold chain scheme under it as well, where in Mega Food Park you get 50 crore rupees of grant, and cold chain you get 10 crore rupees of grant. But then we came up with a mini food park scheme also, where you do not getting 50 acres of land was very tough. In a mini food park, you can make it in 10 acres of land.
Okay.
When I found that the food parks were coming up, but people preferred to put up units outside the food parks, because the scheme allows the food park land to be leased but not sold, because we didn't want it to become a real estate kind of a thing. So people said, why should I put up inside the park? At least the land outside will belong to me. So I came up with another unit scheme, where if you put up a unit inside our mega food parks, you get a 5 crore subsidy for that as well, so that the food parks get populated, and that's how the entire infrastructure will get used, and that's how more farmers will get impacted. So we put in this unit scheme as well. So we came up with a mini food park scheme, we came up with a unit scheme, and then we came up with a backward and forward linkage scheme. In the backward and forward linkage scheme, if it's a farmer who wants to turn towards value addition, so from farm gate preservation to processing to going right up till the market, whatever the forward linkages he wants to make, he gets a subsidy of up to 5 crores for that. If suppose somebody is a processor and he wants to then start growing himself and he wants to start selling himself, so the backward linkage to get till the farm gate level, the infrastructure he needs, to the selling level infrastructure, the backward and forward, he can also get a subsidy.
Okay.
If it's a retailer and he suddenly says, I don't want to keep buying, I want to now make more money, I want to process myself also, he can apply in the backward. So in forward and backward, anybody can apply and they get a subsidy. 35% of their project cost, starting from 10 lakhs to 5 crores, anything in between, whatever your project costs. So we've tried to make it into a very comprehensive kind of thing, which anybody who is wanting to get into the food business, and I think with this scheme, we have suddenly found a lot of educated people who own land and who were into farming are now suddenly looking at putting up either a backward forward linkage or putting up a little cluster or a little mini food park. So a lot more people are going into it because A, they can get from NABARD at a cheaper rate of interest. B, now we've got big companies with, after allowing 100% FDI, we've got huge companies like Amazon, e-commerce, getting into putting in $500 million to get into food retail. These people have to directly tie up with the producers. So now a farmer, if he just takes some grant from here and sets up a sorting, cleaning, grading, washing, packaging, he can straight away supply to a big basket, to a Grofers, to an Amazon, who will then retail.
Okay. So this entire comprehensive scheme does sound very interesting to educated people like me, and you're right, there would be a lot of youngsters who would be attracted to it as well. But when we speak about the farmers again, for farmers who have been traditionally engaged in agricultural activities, to move from agriculture to a sort of a semi-industry or an industry facet becomes a little difficult to navigate all LAs of this particular scheme and for the entire entrepreneurship and business setting up and industry setting up system as well. So how does that happen for the farmer?
So I came up with, coming from the state of Punjab, which is the agrarian state, I totally understand my constituents are just like this. So what I did also was, for the backward forward linkage scheme, we hired two companies, Deloitte and PwC. And their job is any farmer or a group of farmers who show an interest, but they don't know what to do. So we've divided India into north or south. We've divided the states between these two companies. The moment anyone shows an interest, these people go to them, they collect the farmers, they make them into a farmer producer organization. They tell them, okay, what would you like to do? They make their project report, they help them apply for a grant. They will help them set up the infrastructure and then link them to someone who will buy from them. Handhold them for 2 years. Once they're set, that's when they will move out. So okay. I took care of this aspect as well. Now my biggest challenge, what I'm facing now, that if we have made such a beautiful scheme, but to disseminate this information on the ground to the farmer, yes, I'm using radio, I'm using Doordarshan, we're holding meetings across states, but the states governments which are proactive are making maximum use of it because they are pushing it and helping their farmers apply. They are dovetailing their central schemes along with this scheme and making it even more viable. But there are a lot of state governments which are very passive and not as aggressive, and those states are getting left behind. So to disseminate the information to the farmers, the state governments can play a very big role compared to what I can do sitting in the center. So we are doing what we can. And certain states governments have just picked up the scheme and added their own, and it's booming in their states.
One more point here is that when farmers move from this their traditional agriculture to the food processing industry, one hitch or hurdle which is there is that they're now in an industry setup. So all those things, for agriculture, the government does subsidize electricity, water for irrigation and all that. How does it work for the food processing industry? Is it counted at the same level, or do we still look at it in the industry segment? Because that would be a lot of trouble for the rural folks, the farmers who want to come to this.
That's the main reason why I came up with a food processing policy, which I uploaded on my website. And what we actually did was pick up all the best practices of all the state and make a model food processing policy. And I've asked every state government to implement it in their state, and I was in the cabinet waiting to come in as a bill. Because if there is one model policy, at least for someone wanting to come from outside India and invest, there's a level playing field, and which asks for exactly these things, that food processing sector should have the same electricity rates as agriculture, it should be treated at par with agriculture. CLU should not be a necessity. There should be a single window system where you can get all your clearances. I mean, this is the way that you're going to boost them, because every state government is interested in helping out their farmers. But for a farmer or for an industry to get the environment clearance, pollution clearance, water clearance, you know, there are a dozen clearances. So single window system. So there are some states who have been very proactive. Before the policies come into the parliament, they've already adopted it. So obviously they get a head start over the others. But I keep trying to appeal to the other governments also that please adopt these policies, because in your sector it will boom. But where these farmers are concerned, like I said, that the smaller the person applying is, these companies help them out and then they handhold them with all these assistances as well. And I get in with my own hands and feet, where my officers and myself, we speak to the state counterparts very regularly, me with the CMs, my officers with the district administration, and ensure that all help is extended.
So how soon do you believe that policy will see the light of the day? Because that seems to be a very interesting aspect of this entire industry.
People are adopting that policy. Like in World Food India, there were 3 states who announced that adoption of that policy itself over there. As I keep writing to the CMs, many of them do. So whenever it gets passed from cabinet, I guess it'll become a policy and it'll be implemented in entire India.
Okay, let's wait for that. Another aspect here is that in this budget, another operation known as Operation Green was allocated around 500 crores. The focus was on onion, tomato and potato producing farmers, because this is one segment where we see a lot of wastage due to not enough prices being available for the farmers for their produce. What exactly is the target here? 500 crore does seem to be a very less amount. So is this just a pilot project we are looking at, and how do we move ahead from here?
Well, Mission Top, T for tomato, O for onion, P for potato. Yes, this is something which is cooked in every Indian home. And these are the perishables due to which the crazy spikes happen, where on one hand the farmers, when there's a glut, they're not getting the prices, and a couple of months later is the consumer which is paying sky high prices. So
we had governments going down because of this.
Absolutely, totally. So that is why 500 crores was allocated, and with the intention that, you know, like the way Mission Flood was there, which was basically what the milk revolution which came in, wherein Gujarat producers all got together and there was a market in Mumbai, and the idea was that here are the producers and they would all collect and cut out the middlemen and feed the market. So on the same lines to come up with this, and we're in the process of, I've been talking to the stakeholders and having extensive consultations, what kind of a scheme do we evolve, because we already have, you know, I've already made 7-8 schemes which everybody can make use of those. So how do we address specifically these 3 things, these 3 crops in a different manner, which is, I've more or less got the clarity in my own mind how I want to go about it, which is what we are doing is I've picked up in each of these 3 crops the 5 highest producing districts, and after that I'm looking at the closest highest consumption center, and my idea is to connect those 2, where the production is taking place, what is the infrastructure, if there's something lacking, build it, if there's something existing, scale it up. Transportation is going to play a very important role in this, and then where the consumption is, storing hubs over there, people who will distribute, hopefully the farmers should have a connect where they can actually be the suppliers as well. So I'm working in this way that I'm going to try it out in the top 5 producing states and the 5 top consuming states of that, of all these, which makes about 15, 20, 30 of them. And then let's see how it goes. And then I think for every scheme, you've got to see what makes sense after talking to the stakeholders and keep modifying as you go along. One of the reasons why my 12 parks have come up is because I kept modifying the scheme as I saw the issues coming up. So you've got to be flexible and you've got to give in to what the need of the hour is and what the requirement of the people is.
Okay. So to cap this all, in the next 5 or 6 odd years, the projection for the industry which your ministry looks after is somewhere around a 20% odd growth rate and almost $30 billion worth of investment.
Well, I can say that in the since I took over, in the first year, if we would see, if you just look at foreign direct investment, because I think that's a very good, people put their money where they see a market. We were, every year there was about $500 billion worth coming in. after the first year, the second year, there was a 40% increase. We will reach 700, and this year, the year is not even finished. We're already at 800 and something million already. So there's been a 60% increase. And now this is with Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana coming in, the $14 billion worth of MOUs, all those big companies putting it up. There's going to be a huge jump. You know, the gestation period of those 2 years of the infrastructure coming up. After that, you're suddenly going to see the boom because everything is going to start working. That's when the demand is going to happen, where the Farmer Connect is going to start happening, and that's when the output is going to start coming. So it's a market which today is it's one of the highest sunrise sectors, one of the highest growing sectors, biggest potential. And I keep telling people you're missing the boat if you don't get into this right now.
Okay, so it looks like that you're about to say that these numbers also seem conservative for the next 5 years.
Absolutely. Well, okay. I thought myself, when people would ask me that in World Food India, what do you think is going to be the outcome? I used to say, I see that $10 billion worth of investment coming in over the next 3 years. I signed 14 billion in those 3 days. So that's the kind of surprise it took me. I thought we would sign over next 3 years, but it was 14 billion in 3 days. And if you put Kisan Sampada along with it, we're like close to, we're going to be churning out close to $20 billion worth of infrastructure coming up just in the next 2-3 years.
Okay, this looks like a quite promising picture. To end this conversation, we would like to know as to what exactly you believe might be the challenges in the long run, and one more year for your government's tenure. What would be your top priorities in that 1 year to achieve?
My aim is very clear. I have to ground everything which I've done the base work over last 4 years. My push in this last year is just going to be on grounding. That is my #1 objective. Besides Mission Green, Mission Top, there is nothing new I'm going to touch. Just streamline things, push things and get them going so that when we go into elections, I go in that I was given a job and I completed it before limiting this office. And as far as, what was your other question?
The challenges ahead in the long run.
Yeah, the challenges, I think the biggest challenge what I foresee for the food processing sector, that today most of what we grow is the table variety. The processable variety is a different variety which has a longer shelf life and processes better and produces better. Indian farmers are not geared up for processable variety. So while I'm encouraging the processing sector to grow, we have to get the farmers to diversify towards growing processable variety as well, which I think will happen when the industry will ensure that. But at the moment, the challenge what I see that we have more of table variety and the industry is having to process that table variety. And once the farmers start growing the processable variety, the amount of processable variety and the processing is going to scale up much more on its own. So one challenge is that, and the second one is actually getting, like I mentioned earlier, that getting the farmer to get to know about these central schemes where the governments are not so proactive. I talk about my own state, Punjab, where the farmer really needs to diversify. But if I do not get any help, I do not have a proactive government, my farmers are losing out and farmers of other states are getting most of the schemes, benefits of the schemes there.
Okay, so making it farmer friendly and ensuring that farmer knows about it also. Thank you so much for being on Rajya Sabha Television.